Are you working from home right now, or have you considered it? As I record this podcast in September 2020, working from home has become more prevalent than ever in light of COVID-19 quarantine measures and continued restrictions. Businesses have essentially been forced to figure out how to create a viable distributed workforce, and many are finding significant benefits for employers and employees. Working from home, whether as an employee or as an entrepreneur, has been a mainstay for years for moms struggling to balance caregiving and financial independence. Those who've tried it will tell you it is not as glamorous as it seems and not as easy as it looks. But it can be a fantastic solution if approached the right way and with the right mindset. And because more and more people are currently trying to navigate the ins and outs of it, I thought some inspiration and advice was in order, and that's why we're talking about it today. You're listening to the Positively Living podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Zaratny, founder of Positively Productive Systems and a coach certified in time and stress management, helping clients make space for what matters most in their lives. Join me each episode and we'll talk about decluttering, stress management, habits, personalized productivity, gratitude, and so much more. I understand the overwhelm of life because I'm a wife, mom to kids and cats, and a former caregiver. I'm here to help you choose what's right for you so you can do less, live more, and breathe easier. Sound good? Let's get to it. Today's guest on the Positively Living podcast is Kimberly Crossland. Kimberly is the owner and founder of the Focus Driven Biz, a company designed to keep entrepreneurs present, productive, and profitable. The goal of her work is to inspire meaningful change through the power of a strategic, thoughtful approach to business. In her free time, you can find her looking for a new adventure together with her 2 toddlers. She and I met through the online business world and bonded over intentional time management. But since inviting her on the podcast, I have learned more about what she does and have become a huge fan of how she combines effective strategy with a positive spin. I know, you're shocked that would resonate with me, right? Our conversation today is mom to be sure, but the takeaways are overarching life lessons for all of my multitasking, multi-passionate listeners who want to up their work-at-home game. In this episode, Kimberly shares her story of creating and growing her business while caring for her 2 children. She found a way to make it work and is now sharing those tips with others. I'm happy to say we're debunking the need to multitask. Did you hear those air quotes? Yep. It was never actually a thing, and anyone who insists it is trying to sell you something. Instead, we cover so many of the things that I enjoy discussing, such as energy management, enjoyment and enthusiasm, intentional time management and task coupling, and flexibility. We dug right into her list, the 5 Gs of working from home. Kimberly offered simple steps and resources for each. Shall I call them guideposts to keep the G theme going? Yeah, the 5 Gs are 1. Gamification, making things fun because we need more of that. 2. Growth-minded, shifting how you approach goals and stay open. She mentioned a fantastic TED Talk about growth-minded versus fixed-minded approaches, and I'll link to that in the show notes. Grounded, it's balancing the physical and mental energies we have to reduce stress, and it doesn't have to be walking outside barefoot. It's really more about getting outside of your head, and this is especially good for those of us who are very passionate and have all these ideas and are really focused. We need to have that balance. 4 is gratitude. You know that's one of my favorite topics, and she brought a new angle to it today by mentioning a TED Talk about joy spotting. Of course, we had to then talk about self-care, and the guide I created happens to be called the Joy List. You see, the connections are everywhere. And 5 is go with the flow. This was less about telling you that you need to go with the flow, because that could be easier said than done, and more about giving suggestions on how you can support yourself to do so. We talked about her tethered time approach and how when we intentionally and carefully combine certain tasks, we can become efficient without the overwhelm. Be sure to listen for a metaphor Kimberly shares about making life like a museum. It's unexpected and effective and reminds me of the positively productive mantra of making space for what matters. You're going to love it. She has these detailed descriptions of what a museum is like and how when you make your life similar to that, it can open up so many opportunities for you. If you work from home, I'd love to hear from you. What have your greatest challenges been? What are your favorite tips to make the most of it? Do you love it, or are you made for the commute? Message me through the website or the show notes, and I'll be sure to share the results. Now, let's get to the conversation with Kimberly. Welcome, Kimberly Crossland, to the Positively Living podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
We connected in this online business world of ours, and your approach truly resonated with me. I love that you combine a strategic business approach with a real can-do spirit of living what I call the biz mom life. And I think it's so relevant right now as more moms than ever are working from home and trying to balance family responsibilities and, just live their passion. And I'm excited to dig into this topic with you today.
I am too. I get asked a lot about this. And so I'm just like, I feel like I've had this framework inside of me without even realizing that I've had it inside of me. And so to see it coming out and being able to talk about it and helping others who are walking the same walk is just, it's very empowering and exciting. And I absolutely love having these conversations.
Good. I'm so excited. And I would love if you would start by telling us a bit more about who you are, who you help, and really what lights you up.
So I started out as an entrepreneur doing copywriting before I had kids. And 4.5 years ago, I had my first son. And then 19 very short months later, I had my second son. And since then, I've been working from home, still doing a lot of copywriting, but because copywriting takes so much trading of time for money, I decided that I also wanted to get into the strategy side of it. There's so much overlap between what you're putting on the page and what you're writing on the screen for your clients and how they're then taking that and using it to build an audience and build a business and actually grow. And so I started to really shift pretty recently. I will say at the beginning of 2020, pre-pandemic, but I had no idea the pandemic was coming, like none of us did.
Right.
But I'm really glad that I listened to what was, inside of me and saying I need to shift into something new and to be bigger and to reach more people. And so since then, I've been obviously working from home with my kids at home, and it's been fun. It's been exhausting. It's been, all the emotions that go into it. But, like I said, a lot of people look at me and say, how do you do this? Because I'm used to working from home, whereas they're not. And so in hearing that question, I kind of took a step back and I thought, well, I just do it. I don't know. I just show up every single day and I just do it. Right. But in taking a step back, I thought, well, how do I do this? And so I really took an internal look. I looked for patterns in my days. I looked for which days were the hardest. And then I looked for which days were they actually felt surprisingly easy and possible and doable and hope-filled. And I thought, okay, what's different about those days? And from there is where I came up with this framework for how to work from home and not completely lose your sanity most days.
I love that. And I think that's a really good point in there that I want to highlight for everyone. And this is something that's immediate actionable item for you is to look for patterns, right? When we understand how it is that we work, how we work best, and where we can see patterns either going in a direction we want or going in a direction we do not want, we can start to make choices that way. So how old are your kids now?
I have a 4.5-year-old and an almost 3-year-old.
Wow. So, that is still, I think they're a handful at any age, but it's a different kind of handful. And I think when you're in the toddler stage, I still have so much respect for that. But you are, and this is what I'm really excited about. And I love that you're walking the talk. You are doing this. You're making this happen. And now you're helping other women make this happen and figure out how to do it the best way possible. I love that.
Exactly. Yeah, thank you. It's been a journey for sure, but I feel like in this time, especially when we're all isolated and in those moments of parenting and trying to grow a business, we need community now more than ever. We need to come together and share our ideas. I love to hear from other people too, what's working for them and what's not. And then it goes back to what you were just saying. From hearing other stories too, you can pull out patterns from everybody's story and really shift and lean into the positive side of things, because there's a lot to be grateful for, but there's also a lot of hard moments. And so if we can lean on those times where it's actually positive, we can really pull ourselves out of a potential, spiral the wrong direction.
Yes. And you're describing how I describe and how I encourage others to utilize gratitude. And it's the reason why I described what you do as the can-do attitude. Being positive doesn't mean saying it's all great all the time, but it's saying what does work, what can work. And that's what I love about what you do. And you had me so intrigued because I already knew some of what you did, but when you said the 5 Gs of working from home, I'm going to be as surprised as everyone else. So I say, let's dig right into that right now so we make sure we have enough time to cover them all fully. So please start us off.
All right. Well, I'll just name the 5 Gs and then we can dig into each one of them. So the first one is gamification, because I truly believe we all need to have a lot of fun in this world.
Yes.
The next one is growth minded. I truly also believe we need to continuously learn and embrace all these opportunities that are in front of us. The next one's grounded. And then gratitude is in there, which I knew you'd be excited to hear about. And then the final one is go with the flow. So I would love to start off with the gamification, just because I think that fun needs to triumph everything. And as you know, as I just said, I have 2 young children, and I love letting them get messy in the backyard. I love letting them play in dirt. I love letting them splatter paint. It is a mess to clean up. Yes, it is. But seeing their eyes light up and seeing how much they're learning and talking about it. And there's just so much that's buried underneath all that fun that they're having. And they're pulling those lessons out themselves. I thought, where did we lose this along the way? At what point have we stopped making this fun and enjoyable for ourselves? And how can I translate that into what I'm doing for myself and growing a business? Where is the fun involved? Where am I able to make this feel a little bit more like a game? Like I'm moving, maybe along the Candyland board. So a few of the ways that I do that is, first off, and I can send you a picture of this if you'd like for the show notes, but I have calendars that are hanging in my office, and I love color coding them. Mm-hmm. They just being able to see quickly and visually what I have coming up kind of makes me see that finish line. And so I know that when I'm really focused or I'm having a hard time focusing, either way, there's something that's coming down the road and I know that it's waiting for me. And I only put up the good stuff. I don't need to be putting up, the stuff that doesn't light me up inside. For example, accounting is just not my thing. Mm-hmm. I do not enjoy the crunching the numbers. I'm a wordsmith. But so I don't put that stuff up, but I'll put up, I put up this conversation because I was so excited to have it, and I'll put up any kind of commitment where I can get out of just me behind a screen and I can actually connect with others. That's one color on the screen. Mm-hmm. The other color that I like to put up is the content that I'm really looking forward to writing, because that's my, my special zone that I love to live in. Knowing that I have those blog posts coming just for me, or if I have, a video that I want to record or a webinar, I like to have that to look forward to. Not only does it jog my memory that I need to prepare for it, but it's also just something exciting to look forward to. It's kind of that next stage on the journey. And then I also will put up some personal stuff. So I'm a firm believer in self-care, and I'm a firm believer in taking time away. I know we had talked a little bit about this before, but I'm starting a secondary baby business. Hopefully it becomes a business. Right now it's sort of in hobby form, but it's all about going outside and camping. And that's where I love to be. I love to go outside. I love to, I will say glamping is maybe more accurate.
I can appreciate that. Yeah. Yeah.
I do still like to have the shower close by, but it's just still getting outside and it's getting to breathe in that fresh air and get a total change of scenery for a little bit. And thankfully, during this pandemic, that's maintained a possibility, become still possible for us to do. So I have all of that hanging up on my board or on my wall, and I can see it from my desk. You probably see me like glancing over there because I look at it frequently because it is just that nice, fun reminder. So that's kind of the big picture gamification play that I do. I've seen a lot of people do this on their Google calendars too, if they don't want to hang something up in their office, but there's a lot of ways to let those colors sort of quickly and visually spark something inside of you that makes you want to show up and continue showing up. So working from home as a parent, you want to have both the balance between your work and your kids. It's a great way to achieve that.
So as a productivity and organizing coach, and I work with color coding with my clients as well, and I absolutely love it. And I do use it in my Google Calendar, just like you're saying. But what I want to pull out from what you described, which I absolutely love, is you're talking about that energy management side of productivity. You are lifting up your energy and getting yourself excited. And when we feel that way about the stuff that's not no offense to the bookkeeping, I'm the best bookkeeper ever, shout out to Shannon. But it's like that can be somebody else's work. And what I love to do, that's what I want to focus on. And that's what you're saying, the copywriting and the connecting with people, having these conversations, helping other moms. When that lights you up, you show up better.
It's very true. And I heard a study recently. It was from Harvard Business Review, I think, and I can help find the link for you. But it said that we are the most productive when we're enthusiastic about what we're doing. And so knowing that you have those moments ahead of you where you can be really enthusiastic about what you're doing.
Yes.
It helps you to show up. Like you said, it's that energy management side of productivity. So it's so strong.
There was a book I read, and I will try to find it, put it in the show notes, and I think it was called All Tens. And I'm forgetting the name of the author, so I will find it and I'll let everybody know. And it was this idea of making sure that what you're doing and what you have on your to-do list and connecting to what you think is your productivity of getting things done connects to things that are all a hell yes. You want to show up for. So, and I would love a link to that research you're talking about. It all makes sense. So great. So yes, have fun. I am a full proponent of that. And I also want to mention something else. When you talked about your boys getting messy, I think there's this other trend that we have that I would love to see us shift to a new trend of making messy okay.
Absolutely. We have to have permission to get messy. We have to have permission to drop some balls once in a while. I think we end up putting so much pressure on ourselves and because we're so afraid to show up and have those balls drop that we just end up not showing up at all.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's that paralysis. Okay. That is number one. We ready for number two?
We are. So growth minded. There is a fantastic video by Carol. I'm forgetting her last name right now, but I will find it for you as well to put into the show notes. But okay. She did so amazing at talking about the difference between being fixed minded and growth minded.
That sounds familiar. Okay.
Yeah. So being fixed minded is I've got to be a perfectionist. I've got to get everything right. If I'm doing it wrong, then I'm a failure. And that's, you trap yourself so much. It goes right back to what we were just talking about, that fear and that paralysis. Growth minded, of course, on the other side of that is I want to learn. If I make mistakes along the way, if I get messy along the way, then it's okay. And what can I pull from that? And so it's kind of this whole idea of, okay, that didn't work, but here's what's coming next. And so it's a learning experience rather than just a trip and fall and can't get back up. So one of the things that she talks about is in goal setting with this, I guess that could be a 6G. I didn't even think about that till right now, but in goal setting, you can have it so that you shift the way you approach your goals. So rather than a fixed mindset would be, okay, I have a performance-based goal. I've got to meet this. I've got to make this much money. I've got to build my audience this much, or whatever those goals are. And then when you don't meet those numbers, it can really plummet your productivity. It can plummet your happiness. You can feel, just really get in your head about it. And that's such a bummer when that happens.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're growth minded, you can really, you'd shift it to be more of a developmental goal. So not performance, but developmental. And so something that would look like is I'm going to go through this course. I'm going to try this exercise. I'm going to see what's working when I change this habit. When you start to shift and actually make your goals more actionable, you become more growth minded. If it doesn't work, well, that's okay. What can I do next?
Yes.
And you're learning. And so it goes back to that pattern recognition that we talked about in the beginning. We're able to continue taking those action steps, continue propelling yourself into action rather than, I have this lofty goal and I don't know how I'm going to make it. And if I don't make it, I'm a failure. There's such a mindset shift within that it makes you want to show up if you're more developmentally focused rather than the performance focus.
That makes so much sense. It opens up your mind for opportunities and to troubleshoot, as opposed to having it shut down right away and say, well, that didn't work, I need to give up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no throwing your hands in the air and saying, all right, I'm done.
Right. Love that. Okay, good. All right. So we've got the gamification, making things fun, growth minded, grounded next.
Grounded is next. So throughout the day, there's a lot of times where I will start to feel myself kind of drifting mentally. And I know I'm not the only one, especially if I do have a rare moment to sit for a few hours in front of my computer. You start to really kind of shift your energy quite a bit. And so there's a few ways that it happens. First off, you're stagnant. So you're not really doing anything. You're just sitting, even though you're mentally doing a lot, you're physically not doing a whole lot. And then the other thing is you're so busy up, doing things in your head, but not physically moving, that it's hard for you to connect those two energies. So the way that there's actually science behind this, but the way that you can reclaim that energy and lower those cortisol levels, those stress levels from that mental bandwidth, and then raise your, become more relaxed and get more of that physical energy back so you can continue to be very focused and productive, is to physically ground yourself. Now, some people take this to going and walking barefoot in their yard. Other people like to go for a walk. Others like to go for a run. It really doesn't matter how you're physically connecting with the ground. It's just that you're up and you're moving your body and you're actually getting back to your roots, I guess. It's more of that primal instinct of wanting to just physically feel yourself moving and lowering those harmful levels and while raising the good levels so you can get back to that balance.
Good. I like that. It's such an important point that you're making about how, and I know that I do this all the time. And I think those of us who are multi-passionate and excited about what we're doing, so many times they say, our overwhelm and our stress and stuff like that can come from us, from good things, that we want to create all the things and we're so excited and we're jumping into our projects and stuff. But we do need to be mindful of that balance. So that stress that you're talking about of being so focused, this is a great reminder for me. That'll be my action item for today. And I also like the fact that the grounded doesn't have to be so literal. I mean, you do see things on Instagram, with people barefoot on the ground. And I mean, while I love that, that's not always an option, especially as we head into winter in New York. But the idea of that balance between the mind and the body and movement and kind of shifting those energies and helping that release one side and not the other. It's kind of like when you're sitting and your shoulders get all tense, and remembering to kind of, if you move in a different way, your body starts to shift and you can release those things. So yeah,
Exactly.
that's so good. And I like this idea of just reminding yourself to not be in your head so much.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the other ways that I found that really works, especially because I know there's a lot of working moms listening.
Yes.
I live in Arizona, so I have kind of the opposite problem weather-wise as you do up in New York. But we are emerging from the triple digits. And one of my favorite things to do is to take my boys for a walk, put on a podcast. They start to sort of settle themselves down while I re-energize myself. I'm both mentally still engaged, but I really know that I can use that time to ground myself while also re-energizing my mental capacity. And it's such an easy thing that we can do. It's just about baking it into the routine. Of course, when it's 110 degrees out or below zero,
Right.
It's not as possible. But for the most part, I think that we can find some way to break out of it. The other thing that I've done that a lot of people have found interesting, which I didn't think about it at first, but now looking back, it was kind of a really exciting part of my life, was when I had my babies, both of them would sleep when they were on me. And I know there's a lot of problems. Some people find a lot of concerns with that, but it worked for us. And now they're sleep trained. They're a little bit older. Everything's fine. But what I would do was when they're having a hard time sleeping, I put a treadmill underneath my desk. I would walk on my treadmill. It's a desk treadmill, so it doesn't go over 2 miles per hour. I'm still at my desk. It's a stand-up desk, so it would raise up. And I would just walk. They would take an hour and a half long nap, and I would get some work done. And I was both relaxing myself through that grounding concept. I was with my child, and so I still felt like we had that connection, but I was also feeling like, yes, I can do some work. I can get something checked off my to-do list, which really gets me excited whenever I can check something off. And so it was one of those moments where I thought, man, there's a lot going on here, and yet it just feels so rhythmic and so easy and calming at the same time.
Yeah, you're talking about efficiency that I absolutely adored. And I'm going to go ahead and assume this is the tethered time management approach that you and I first bonded over. That was the phrase that I got excited about. And it's the idea of saying, listen, you can do more than one thing if you select the right things to combine. And I think that's key. You were talking about going very slowly on this treadmill because it's a dedicated one for your desk and holding your children at the same time. Of course, I love the idea of going for a walk and listening to a podcast. Go for a walk and listen to this conversation right now. This is perfect. So, and then you're checking off more things, and it's not just about checking them off. It's about what you're doing that, again, lights you up and lifts your spirits and makes you feel accomplished. It's not about being busy, but it is about doing the things that resonate with you, that make you feel like you're moving forward, that you're accomplishing what you want to accomplish. And there is really something to that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that tethered time concept, on the surface, it can feel very much like multitasking, which I think is a word. When we hear multitasking, we think, I've got to be juggling all these balls. I've got to be doing all these things. And it immediately comes with this weight of overwhelm.
Right.
But with tethered time, it's one of those moments where it's not multitasking. I'm not cooking while I'm also balancing the kids. And it's just, constant like chaos. It's one of those moments where it can be really calming and really energizing because you're getting a lot done, but you're also still doing multiple things at one time.
Right.
So I like to, the other night, I was thinking about this podcast, and I had my kids in the bathtub, and I was getting my laundry done, and I was listening to some music. And I thought, what a great like, I just felt like I was being really productive. They were having a great time. I was right there with them, so they're safe. And we were just, we were having fun as a family, but still work was getting done. And so it was one of those moments where it's like, well, this is another personal, in the personal world, maybe not quite not necessarily the working world, but it's one of those other moments where we can find and be very intentional about finding that time. What can we do that's going to feel good and still be productive without draining our energy or causing that overwhelm?
Right, exactly. And that overwhelm comes from when we're having to make certain decisions and use our brains in certain ways. And so it's a great example of saying, well, I could listen to an audiobook and fold my laundry. The folding of the laundry does not require decisions. If I'm decluttering, maybe not so much. Sometimes it's obvious. It's like, I'm just trying to pull out this size because I know my children, don't fit in this particular size. That's an easy kind of filter. Yeah, that, and I can listen to an audiobook at the same time. But, there are opportunities. And that's why I was saying, connecting the right kinds of actions together, that brings that calm, fulfilled sense of achievement versus the overwhelm that you're talking about. And you're absolutely right. Multitasking, by the way, totally debunked. Really what it is shifting between tasks. And it really depends on your energy, on the, executive management of your brain. It depends on a lot of things, but I love what you're talking about because it's intentional pairings.
Exactly. It's such a great way to say that.
Love it. Okay. I'm a little excited about number 4. Can't lie. Are we ready for gratitude?
We are
Yay.
so ready for gratitude. So I want to kick this one off with a quote from somebody named Ingrid Fettel-Lee, and I'll send you a link to her TED Talk. But she talks a lot about joy spotting. And in her TED Talk, she talks specifically about, she was a designer, and she she presented something to some judges. She said, I had worked so hard on this and I put it in front of them to judge, and they had seconds to judge it after I'd been working for months on something and, so much mental bandwidth. And they paused and they said to her, it makes me feel joy. And she thought, well, that's interesting. What does that, how did something I designed, a physical, tangible thing, make you feel joy? And so she did a lot of research, and she decided, or she found by looking at different cultures. I mean, she went over to Japan and stayed in a hotel that was full of color and all these different shapes. She said that was maybe a little bit much, but the concept was still the same. There are certain things that we can surround ourselves that bring us that joy and remind us that life isn't so bad, And so she wrote something that I think is really powerful. And so she said, as a culture, we are obsessed with the pursuit of happiness. And yet in the process, we kind of overlook joy. I think that as we get into these routines and we're parenting during a pandemic and trying to work during a pandemic, and even beyond the pandemic, anytime you're working from home, it's really easy to say, I'm going after my dream. I'm going after being the best parent possible and looking at that pursuit of happiness. And yet we overlook those joyful moments. And so she calls it joy spotting. And basically what you're doing is going out there and looking for these different shapes and elements that she found that will bring out these little joyful triggers. So for example, sprinkles on ice cream, anything colorful and in bulk, just instantly. I mean, and you can picture it right now when they say sprinkles on ice cream. You can picture a moment you're sitting outside with your kids eating ice cream, or as a child eating ice cream. Bubbles is another thing that she said, anything that's round, anything symmetrical. So you think about butterflies. Now, all of this, she found, can sometimes lead to images of being very childlike and childish. And that's what the point where we, I think as adults, start to not look for them anymore. And we don't lean into those moments because we wear black, white, gray, or navy to the office. There's no color. It's very difficult to pull out, those moments where you're having fun. And like we said before, getting messy and just enjoying yourself. But if you surround yourself with that, and at the end of the day, you look back and say, what gave me joy? What can I be what can I be grateful for? Where is the gratitude baked into that? You can really start to embrace that energy and just feel really good about what you just did in the last 24 hours. Because even when the chaos hits and everything is chaotic and you're just overwhelmed with life and the day, and your kids go to bed and you're like, well, I got a blog post to write and I've got, all this, a presentation to prepare, which by the way was my night last night. You can take a step back for 5 minutes and say, but what can I be grateful for? And I actually have a product called Content Confetti. And the whole reason why I called it Content Confetti is because I wanted people to get excited about bringing their voice into the world. And this confetti is that same concept of sprinkling ideas like sprinkles on ice cream, and then helping people to achieve something and helping them to be grateful for what you're doing too. So it's kind of that twofold gratitude. You can be grateful for what you have, but then also hoping that you inspire someone else, that they're grateful that they've met you and connected with you, because I think that's where we get a lot of joy as well.
Absolutely. And sharing gratitude is one of the most wonderful ways to practice it, because it creates that ripple effect. And all of what you're describing, I love for so many reasons. Of course, now we're coming back to this idea of fun. These are all interconnected in a beautiful way, of taking a note from a really wonderful, joy-filled moments of childhood, potentially, or at least what we can envision of them. Rainbow sprinkles, my daughter's all over that. I'm right behind her with that, of course. And this idea of searching for things that find us joy, I love, because when I was trying to help people understand self-care a bit better, and, we can call it self-maintenance if we want to be practical. I did find that term recently and I thought, oh, that's pretty good. Maybe think about it that way. But really the idea of figuring out what lights us up. And that's why I asked that question at the beginning of our conversation, because that's so important. And when you ask that question, it's really about when you're lit up and excited, there's joy and wonder. And the worksheet that I have that helps people, it asks the questions that helps them come to understand what lights them up, is called the Joy List.
Perfect.
Right? That's what we're searching for. And what you're describing here too, based on Ingrid's description and based on yours too as well, is that awareness and that seeking out, that looking for, that paying attention to, even in the midst of the chaos that we're going through. For me, I know personally on the gratitude side, it was a lot of crazy, but I could have these moments with everyone home. My daughter and I have been going through the Harry Potter series again. We've been reading
Oh,
that,
fun.
and and it's really joyful to me to have her love reading as much as I do, and for us to be so into it that we're like booking time together besides just before bedtime that we read together. But now we're like, okay, when you get up in the morning, when do you have your next appointment? We read this morning before you and I had our recording. And it's just, those are things, you sometimes don't realize it in the moment, but that's what I love about you bringing this up and helping us have that awareness, is that those are moments of joy. And the more we can acknowledge them and share them, the more they can grow.
Absolutely. I love how you said that.
Okay, yay. I was excited about gratitude, but so far they have all been fantastic. Let's have a strong finish with number 5. Go with the flow. Where are we going with this, Kimberly?
Yes. So this is there's a reason why I put this one at the end, and it's go with the flow sounds very, on the surface, it sounds pretty obvious, go with the flow, which is so much easier said than done. I think that, I'll tell you, let me give you a little bit of backstory. So this week, my son broke his collarbone.
Mm.
I had a very busy week ahead of me, and everything obviously had to stop for him because he's my baby. And I think all parents can relate to that. We cannot control what's going to happen. And we cannot control moments like that when they suddenly in an instant slip and fall right in front of you, and there's nothing you can do. And so you have to be able to go with the flow. And so what I have done before this week, this is not an impromptu thing, but it just reminded me of, this is why I build my days the way I do, is I intentionally will set up my schedule to feel much more like a museum rather than a mall. And so if you think about a mall back when those existed, but you can still, envision what it's like to be in a mall. You've got kiosks down the middle. You've got people as you're walking through, they're asking you questions. They're trying to get your attention. You've got flashy signs. You've got, banners hanging in the windows. You got the smell of Cinnabon coming at you. All of your senses are going at the same time. And you're very overwhelmed. There's just so much going on. And I think that that's often how we'll fill our days. When we're not intentional about how we're setting up our schedules and how we're deciding where we put our time, we start to live in a mall. But if you think about a museum, you have a purpose for walking into that room. You know that every single room that you're going to enter in right after that is either dedicated to another animal type, or it's dedicated to another region or type of art or specific artist. There's a lot of intentionality but there's also space there. And there's exit routes, so you can get out very easily if you need to, and then get right back in. It's just very calming, but yet very rich and elegant and luxurious. And it feels really good to be there. And so I think that when we start to plan our routine with that in mind, we're a lot less likely to stuff in the times when we're distracted by the inbox because it's dinging, or the Slack messages are going off, or I've got to check my notifications on Facebook. We're able to be just really focused and in tune with where we're at. And that goes with both being focused on our work, but then also being focused on our kids. Now, when you start to think about the tethered time, to go back to that, how you had said, being very intentional about the things you put together, this is where it comes in. It comes in really strong, because if you're not intentional about what you're tethering together, it'll start to get to that overwhelmed mall-like state. Whereas if you're more focused and intentional about what you're planning and how you're planning your days, and say, okay, well, I'm going to work out while the kids are doing this, or I'm going to work while the kids are napping, or I'm going to get up because I'm a morning person and I'm going to knock this out first thing before they wake up. As you start to pair your day and lay it out, it becomes very freeing, and you can see how it's going to take shape, but you still have that wiggle room to go with the flow. If your kids wake up early, for example, well, that's okay. I know where I can put this in later, and I can finish this up. you have that mental freedom to continue through your day and not feel that overwhelm necessarily.
Right, because you have, again, the word of the day is intentional.
Yes.
How many times can we say that? Intentional. But there's a reason for it, because you are being selective. You are choosing. And that, I think, is such an important repeat topic. It's a concept that I absolutely love, because so often we feel like we don't have a choice. And there are some select places in our lives that we truly do. And when we do, incredible things can happen. And I have to say, that is such an elegant metaphor. I absolutely love that. The museum and how it can still be so rich and bring you so much while still having that space. And of course, that ties in beautifully to my constant commentary about decluttering and opening up space, making space for what matters. And what you're talking about here in terms of time management, I call it time buffering, and making sure that when you have an appointment, you have time on either side. Because, when we're finished with this conversation, we're going to have another one. We can't help ourselves because we have so much we want to talk about. And then sometimes there are delays that come up. And I think that when we create that space for ourselves, we can more readily go with the flow, like you're saying. So really, it's not so much that you're saying go with the flow, but you're saying set your life up such that it will support you in being able to go with the flow.
Exactly. If you make that choice, like you said, and you're there choosing what you're going to do and how you're going to lay out your day, it's so much easier to know that if things come up, you're going to be okay.
Love that. I love that. Okay. That was, I think, excellent timing, such that we can now go into a little bit of a fun wrap up, and it's going to tie into lots of things. Speaking of fun, the first question I have for you that's just plain fun is, please fill in the blank. The song that always makes me dance is?
Thunder by Imagine Dragons. I don't know what it is about that song, but I just love it.
This is fantastic. Okay, Thunder by Imagine Dragons. And the quote or mantra I share most often is?
Breathe, believe, and battle. So this is actually one that came from a volleyball Olympian, and she said her coach used to tell it to her. So she said, breathe through the pain, believe in your training, and battle to the end.
Oh, that's good. Breathe, believe, and battle. Don't give up. And we just talked about this, but I'm going to bring it up again, because now it's time for you to share, if you would please. What or whom or both are you grateful for today, Kimberly?
Oh, you're so sweet. Okay, I'm grateful for you in this conversation. I absolutely enjoy it. And I'm really grateful for my kids and their teachers. They let my son go back to school, which he was dying to go back to school, even with a broken bone, and he's been doing great with it. And so I'm just so grateful that they embraced him, not physically embraced him, but emotionally embraced him and let him back in, because he is so happy there.
Yeah, there's something really special when others come to the aid and support of our little ones. It's such a special thing for mamas. So I'm happy for you that happened and that we could have this conversation today. I am most certainly grateful for you and all that we've discussed so far. So now I know people will want to be in touch with you, and I think you have something that you would love to share with the listeners, as well as where we can find you online, if you would.
Yes. So if you, so we'll start with where you can get something from me for
Mhm.
free. I have both a free webinar. If you go to thefocusdrivenbiz.com/webinar, where I talk about, I don't know what it is about the number 5, but I talk about the number 5 over there, 5 elements for jump starting your business. So if you do work for yourself, it's a great way to kind of reset that mindset and get more productive in your business with different elements, which are presented in the webinar. And then I also have a free quarterly business plan. So just something really simple that you can do within 15 minutes, but it'll help you to get out of your head, get it on paper, and sort of outline what your next 90 days are going to look like. So you can get that at thefocusdrivenbiz.com/plan.
Okay.
And then, of course, I'm on Instagram at thefocusdrivenbiz. And also I have a private Facebook group that I would love for you to join, also called The Focus Driven Biz.
Fantastic. And so those are all great places to find you. But I will have to say that jumpstarting your biz, even though my business is already started and jumpstarted, it goes back to that growth mindset, right? We can always be learning. We can always be inspired. And I watched it and I got a lot of inspiration from it. So I highly recommend that. So I will make sure that we have all these links in the show notes so people can easily link to them. But even if you just search for Kimberly Focus Driven Biz, you will find her and you will be so glad you did. So thank you, Kimberly. Thank you for shining your light in this world and for sharing it with us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
If you don't come apart for a while, you will come apart after a while. Dallas Willard. Thank you for joining me on the Positively Living podcast. Your time is precious, and I'm honored you chose to spend it with me. If you'd like more information on today's show, you can find a link to the show notes on positivelyproductive.com/podcast. If you found value in the show, please click subscribe, and even better, give a quick review on iTunes. It supports me and will help others find the show. If you'd like more positive content, come join me on social media. Positively Productive on Facebook and positively_Lisa on Instagram. Get ready for kids, cats, and all my quirky humor over there. I look forward to having you join me next episode. Until then, keep it positive and keep making space for what matters most.